We hope that you have enjoyed your dinner, and we're going to move now to our keynote address, and it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker. The Most Reverend Paul D. Etienne was named Archbishop of Seattle by our Holy Father Pope Francis on September 3rd, 2019. Before that, he was the fourth Archbishop of the Archdiocese of Anchorage in Alaska, and previously served for 7 years as the Bishop of Cheyenne, Wyoming. Archbishop Etienne is a native Hoosier. Welcome back to the state of Indiana. He was born in Tell City, Indiana, and we're going to hear a little bit about that tonight. One of 6 children. He has 2 brothers who are Catholic priests and a sister who is a Benedictine nun. He studied at Bellarmine College in Louisville, Kentucky, at the University of St. Thomas in St. Paul, Minnesota, and at the Pontifical Gregorian University in Rome, where he earned a licentiate in spiritual theology in 1995. Ordained a priest for the Archdiocese of Indianapolis in 1992, he served as pastor of several parishes, as vocation director of the Archdiocese, and as the vice rector of the Bishop Simon Brute College Seminary. Archbishop Etienne is no stranger to the challenges and the opportunities, both, that we have been discussing today. He's currently leading the Archdiocese of Seattle through a pastoral planning process. He's leading them through a significant downtown development project, and finally through the creation of a Laudato Si action plan. We're grateful that several of the Archdiocesan staff leaders who are working with the Archbishop in these areas have joined us also this evening, and we're especially grateful to the Archbishop for his pastoral and administrative leadership and for the insights that he'll share with us this evening. Archbishop Paul Etienne.
Thank you, Father Keith. Thank you, Father Bill East, and to all the others who hopefully had the wisdom to invite me to be here to speak to you tonight. I want to let you know that Maddie called me to give me a little background about this conference and give me some sense of what she was looking for. So if this hits the mark tonight, you can give her credit. If it doesn't, you can blame me. But I'd just like to begin the presentation this evening, and I hope to leave this kind of fluid, especially towards the end of my remarks. But just on this topic of properties and facilities, it's important, as I've been hearing with a number of the presentations that I was able to attend today, to put it within the broader context of faith and creation. After all, our faith is what brings us together to this conference this evening. I want to begin with a quote from the first letter of St. Peter. Each of you should use whatever gift you have received to serve others as faithful stewards of God's grace in its various forms. I think this passage from St. Peter helps all of us to understand that we are stewards of everything God has entrusted to us, including our church buildings and properties. And we should use these resources wisely for the service of others. The human person's relationship with nature, creation, is so obvious that it can be, and I think very often in our culture today, is taken for granted. We walk upon the earth. We breathe the air of the universe. We see by the light of the sun, enjoy all the comforts of the day, which all find their origins in the Creator. From the food we eat, to the energy we rely upon, to the materials that make up our wardrobe, the cars we drive and the homes we live in, even the complex nature of society, whether it is healthy or not, reveals how we are all related and rely upon one another. And for us as Christians, we know the origin of all these good things is the triune God. Moments such as this conference are good opportunities to drill down once again to the basic origins of the human person, the human family, the universe in which we live. And as we do so, we realize the absolute importance of being good stewards of all that is entrusted to us, individually and as a universal church. As Pope Francis likes to say, everything is connected. As Father Keith mentioned, I grew up about 325 miles due south of here. Father Beryl, that's where Tell City is, the Ohio River, at the southern part of Indiana. Approximately 75% of that county I grew up in, Perry County, was national forest and still is today. And when my ancestors came over from Europe, the French side, well, both the French and the German side of my family came from the Alsatian region. My dad's side of the family, the French side, were foresters and loggers. And the German side, my mom's side of the family, were carpenters. And today, my brother, one of the priests, my oldest brother, we're the two oldest, he and I now manage together over 200 acres of hardwood forest for quality hardwood timber, very near where we grew up. I have a love of creation in my blood, and I see the natural symbiotic relationships of so many things in creation and how the human person benefits when the various ecological systems are properly cared for and maintained. I remember when my brother and I did our first walkthrough of the property with our forester, because neither one of us knew what we were doing, and we had just put the property into a classified forest program. And he and I had plenty to learn about best practices of forestry. And at the end of the day, the forester, knowing that the two of us were priests, he looked at us and he said, "Guys, there's one thing you need to know about forestry. It's probably a lot like preaching. Growing trees and preaching, it takes a long time until you see results." And my friends, God, our Creator, is the quintessential long-term investor in humanity. And I think we all know that, and we've all experienced that. So please bear with me as I use forestry as an analogy for our conference on church properties. When my brother and I bought this small woodlot, it was in terrible condition, to say the least, due to the unethical harvest of the two previous owners. However, nature is resilient. At the time, there was much intervention, human intervention, that was necessary to restore the forest to its full potential. Damaged trees needed to be removed, as did the overgrown non-crop trees, which were consuming the largest amount of the canopy space, robbing precious sunlight from the forest floor and other desirable species. Invasive species were taking root, and the grapevines and briars were wreaking havoc on the young crop trees trying to establish themselves. So, with no small amount of energy, sweat, and blood, the forest began to regenerate in a very healthy fashion. Several years ago, we invited a logger, whose last name happens to be also Etienne, to come to the place and take a look at it. He had been invited to do the last harvest on that property before we bought it, and he refused to do it because it was just so unethical. They were cutting down 16-inch white oak trees to use as railroad ties. Pathetic. But he knew the condition that forest was in when my brother and I took it over about 26 years prior, and he couldn't believe the condition it was in now. And we did our first harvest just a couple of years ago after managing it for that 26 years. And he told us of all of the forest and the small woodlots that he does business in, this one is probably one of the highest quality small woodlots in southern Indiana today. So it just shows a lot about what we can do with proper cooperation with nature. Now, a lot of dioceses own a lot of property. And as my two guys here will tell you, Ed Foster especially back there, we own over 800 acres of property. And we just put some of that into a forest management program. Might have had something to do with the local bishop. With all of our dioceses, our starting point for good stewardship begins with what we have today, what we have inherited from those who've gone before us. To no small degree, all buildings and properties that the church owns are an expression of the faith of the people. And that's very important for all of us to really appreciate and understand. They represent the desire of the people of God to support the church in all her ministries and services, and to work, or the work of the past and the good work of our contemporaries, add to this wealth of faith. Now, we have a vast assortment of facilities and properties throughout the local church, throughout the national experience. And as all of you know and have been talking about, some are managed and cared for better than others. And now we are finding as well, and I'm not going to talk too much about that, but there's beginning to be an excess of properties as well. But as a people of faith understand, the real change agent for us as church is always Jesus Christ. And I want to just share with you one paragraph from the compendium of the social doctrine of the church. It's paragraph number 454, and it reads, "The entrance of Jesus Christ into the history of the world reaches its culmination in the Paschal mystery, where nature itself takes part in the drama of the rejection of the Son of God and in the victory of his resurrection. Crossing through death and grafting onto it the new splendor of the resurrection, Jesus inaugurates a new world in which everything is subjected to him, and he creates anew those relationships of order and harmony that sin had destroyed. Knowledge of the imbalances existing between man and nature should be accompanied by an awareness that in Jesus Christ, the reconciliation of the human family and the world with God, such that every human being aware of divine love can find anew the peace that was lost, has been brought about." And that's another very basic Catholic teaching, really at the heart of all that we are talking about in these days. So I want to talk more now about specific initiatives that we are undergoing at the Archdiocese of Seattle. And I know I'm talking at the end of a day and at the end of a meal, and so I'm not going to talk a whole lot longer. If you want to know more specifics, just talk to Ed back here. In the Archdiocese of Seattle, we are looking to the future, and I know all of our dioceses are. But we do so mindful that we must make the best use of the resources we have for carrying out the mission of the church, which is to proclaim Jesus Christ to the world. Our properties and facilities can hinder us if we are spending too much time and capital maintaining them, or they can be a rich resource for this work of ministry. Shortly before I was appointed to Seattle a little over 5 years ago, archdiocesan leaders had already begun looking at our properties around our cathedral and asking the question, what is the best way to utilize or monetize these properties for the mission of the church? And I think a lot of people, when they look at what we're doing, fail to realize the last part of that phrase, that we're doing it for mission. It's not about real estate. It's about the mission of the church. And it's very important to keep that in mind. We own 3 old chancery buildings around the cathedral and 1 old archbishop's residence, which served as the residence of the archbishops for over 100 years. I'm no longer living there. Each of these properties are in need of substantial upgrades. However, in Seattle, and I've heard mention of this in other big areas around the country as well, there is a dire shortage of housing. So we are blessed to have perhaps one of, if not the most active cathedral parish in the country, St. James. And this cathedral sits in the middle of these properties, and they're all contiguous practically on adjacent blocks to the cathedral. So for us, it made sense to find a developer who could turn these properties into residential housing facilities, including a percentage for low-income housing. And as Providence often does, we found just the right person, a guy by the name of Ian Gillespie, a developer out of Canada, a company named Westbank, which is a global developer recognized for its long-term commitment to sustainable building. Our vision is to create an inspiring, carbon-neutral community that enhances the future of the cathedral neighborhood, while also supporting the continued mission of the Catholic Church. This creative use of our properties to achieve the mission of the church is good stewardship. Redevelopment in this very efficient and sustainable manner reflects our Catholic values of caring for our common home, as well as caring for the needs of the residents of Seattle. There's a real commitment to the environment in this project that we also find very attractive. Westbank and its affiliate, which was developed by Ian Gillespie, the owner of Westbank, called Creative Energy, they have partnered with Swedish Health Services on First Hill in Seattle, and Swedish is a part of the Providence Healthcare Network. And they are working with Creative Energy, this affiliate of Westbank, to modernize the Swedish healthcare campus infrastructure. And as a part of this project, Swedish will be able to divert excess heat from its First Hill campus to a new energy sharing platform. And through this platform, Swedish will be able to share excess heat, and believe me, they were wasting an unbelievable amount of energy on an annual basis, which now becomes a source of heating for other buildings connected to the platform. And these new residential towers that are going to be built will be connected to that energy platform, dramatically reducing the overall carbon footprint of the whole new neighborhood. So this infrastructure investment is a part of the commitment Swedish and Providence have made to be carbon negative by the year 2030. As a part of the redevelopment of these older buildings, Westbank plans to create upwards of 1,300 residential homes across this housing continuum, connected to this new district energy system. And that's not the end of the good news about that particular project, because it's also going to support affordable housing. So in addition to the existing and exciting sustainable development, this planned development has the potential to generate over $25 million for the City of Seattle's Mandatory Housing Affordability Fund, which the city will allocate to build housing. Now, this money will be made available to low-income and affordable housing builders, such as our own Catholic Housing Services, one of the largest providers of low-income and affordable housing in the city of Seattle, which already operates 2 similar buildings near the cathedral. So the Archdiocese of Seattle is now in the process of identifying the location and design of a new chancery space for our 125 employees, which will also reflect sustainable energy and construction materials. So that's the really big project in and around the cathedral that I think some of the folks here read about and thought, oh, we need to get Archbishop Etienne to come talk about this. The other thing, and I know a lot of the dioceses around the country are dealing with this, is just the reorganization of all of our parishes. The Archdiocese of Seattle has presently, and my other young man here, Elijah, can give me the specific numbers, but I'm going to put us in the ballpark of 173 parishes. And this reorganization is recognizing that this status quo is no longer an option. We had to do something. The recent trends that we're all experiencing of the difficulty with fewer people attending Mass, celebrating the sacraments of the church, such as marriage, fewer births, fewer baptisms, the declining numbers of priests, and even the difficulty in attracting qualified lay ministers for all of the ministry needs in our parishes. These were just some of those realities that were staring us in the face as parishes were spending more and more of their financial resources to maintain their campuses. And it was just time to address this need. We're doing this at the moment of bringing these parishes together in what we're calling parish families so that we're not closing parishes. But we are asking the people of God to decide what is the best use of their resources. So we are in a big process of consulting parishioners, educating them first why this is necessary, and that's been critically important in this process that's been going on for well over 2 years now. We just implemented these new parish families July 1st. But by consulting them in these important decisions in a manner that allows them to share in the decision making. And this is just one example of how we are also striving to become a more synodal church, which is also something that we're all hearing a lot about in these days. We are engaging our people at the parish level with the challenge that we're facing archdiocesan-wide, making them more aware, which invites them to be more engaged. And it's working. It is working. It's not this self-fulfilling prophecy that we're going to have to close our doors and turn out the lights. Quite the opposite is true. Since we started educating our people about this challenge and telling them we're going to address it, they've kind of woken up. Our mass attendance numbers over the last 2 years have been growing. Our school enrollment, again, is growing. Financial contributions are up. So we shouldn't shy away from telling people the challenges that we're facing because they want to be a part of the solution. And they see things very uniquely differently from the pew than I see it from the chancery or all of those who work on my team from the chancery. So it's amazing. We are now very close to being back at pre-COVID numbers for mass attendance in the Archdiocese. There was a Jesuit who had served in the Archdiocese for over 40 years, and when I announced that we were going to do this, he told me, he says, "Archbishop, you're the 4th Archbishop that I've served in the Archdiocese under. You are the 4th Archbishop to study the reality of the number of parishes that we have. You are the 1st Archbishop to take any action." And most of the people have said this should have happened at least 25 years ago. So don't be afraid to talk to the people about the challenges, because their faith is strong, and nobody wants the church to succeed more than the people in the pews. Even more so than the bishop and the priest, probably, if we're brutally honest about it. And they will roll up their sleeves and get into the trenches to do what is necessary. I'm a firm believer in shared decision-making. And this has been an incredible process. I'm just very grateful for the team that came together to make this happen. But more than anything, I am just tremendously grateful that the people of God of the Archdiocese, I mean, there's a lot of anxiety, there's a lot of frustration. Pastors and pastoral leaders are a little overwhelmed at the moment, but we're moving the ball forward. One of our priests had a great line, and part of the leverage I had on our priests was, when I arrived, I went around to all of the deanery meetings and visited with all of the priests, and the number one thing, unanimously, they told me is, Archbishop, we have too many parishes. Please do something about it. So when I finally pulled the trigger on this, I was able to say to him, this was your idea, now get behind it. And they did, almost to a person. But one of the guys said, Archbishop, it's not a matter that we have too few priests. We have too many parishes. So now these parish families, they've been given 3 years. This first year, the guideline is go slow, but build community. Bring these people from, whether it's 2 or 3 or 4 or 6 parishes now coming together to make one, start building a new family parish identity. Help the people get to know each other. Form a parish leadership group. And I've been explicitly clear with the pastors. You cannot come in and tell the people what's going to happen. You have to consult. This is their parish. This is their faith. And they have some very good ideas about its future. So I'm having troubles getting all of the priests to buy into that. But that's the ground rule. My friends, you all know this, and this room represents it. We are living in the age of the laity. And I want to share another passage of Scripture with you. This is from Paul's first letter to the Corinthians, and he writes, "Now it is required that those who have been given a trust must prove faithful. Faithfulness in managing church property reflects our being entrusted by God with a sacred task. And our care and maintenance of these facilities should demonstrate our faithfulness to the Lord." So by baptism, each of us is incorporated into Christ and made participants in His life and mission. All of us who are baptized. Anybody here been baptized? Get those hands up. Don't be shy. And don't be afraid to ask your people when you go back home who's been baptized. Make them own it. And let them know that there's more than salvation in that. There's mission. And get them to roll up their sleeves and be a part of the solution. As a bishop, I am extremely grateful for the incredible gifts of the people of God and their generosity in bringing those gifts to the complex challenges of properly managing and utilizing the vast properties of the church. And that means all of you present in this room tonight. I'm very grateful for what all of you are doing and the various expertise that you bring to these serious challenges that we face. But we face them with great trust in God. The Lord has a plan. And that's what synodality is inviting us to, is to open our hearts to the power and prompting and guidance of the Holy Spirit, to be the church of today that is needed in the world of today. It's still the same church, animated by Pentecost. It's just a different place and time and people. But it's the same baptism, the same Lord, the same faith in a new context. And the Lord will show us the way. But we need faith. So exercise your baptismal responsibility every day. Proclaim the gospel with your witness of life rooted in Christ, lived in the ordinary circumstances of life. Exercising your co-responsibility for the mission of the church is exactly what Pope Francis and the Synod on Synodality is calling us to. And I pray we find a way to mobilize more and more of the faithful people of God, that we may become the church the Lord needs us to be in the world today. I got more to say, but I'm not going to. So, God bless you. Thanks for all you're doing. Thanks, everyone.